"You don't belong here," Carolyn snapped, her voice slicing through the quiet elegance of the lounge. Brielle rose slowly from her seat, her eyes locked on the hotel manager as guests turned to stare, some in shock, others in silent agreement. Moments later, security arrived, and the woman invited to speak at the National Leadership Summit was being dragged out like a trespasser. Under the golden morning light filtering through the glass canopy of the city skyline, Brielle Morgan stepped out of the sleek black rideshare that had just pulled up to the front entrance of the Astoria Grand, Chicago's most exclusive five-star hotel. With her soft leather tote slung over her shoulder and her suitcase rolling smoothly behind her, she paused briefly to take in the stunning architecture. Today was supposed to be a milestone in her journey, a full-circle moment. From coding apps on her bedroom floor to being invited as a keynote speaker at the prestigious Women in Leadership Summit, Brielle had carved a space for herself in the tech and wellness world, and she had done it without shortcuts. She'd been recently featured in Fast Company for her AI-powered mental wellness platform tailored to women of color. It had gone viral not just because of the tech, but because of its heart. This was her moment. Dressed in a sleek navy pantsuit that hugged her frame with precision, her curls perfectly coiled and glowing under the morning sun, Brielle exhaled slowly before walking into the marble lobby. Inside, the Astoria Grand was every bit as luxurious as advertised. Crystal chandeliers dangled above like frozen fireworks. The scent of fresh peonies lingered in the air. At the reception desk, a pair of concierges in tailored uniforms smiled and greeted the well-dressed couple ahead of her. Brielle smiled softly and waited her turn. But then it happened. The shift. The moment where something inside her paused. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Carolyn Whitman, the hotel's manager, an elegant white woman in her mid-50s with platinum blonde hair swept into a tight chignon, step out from the side office. Carolyn's eyes scanned the lobby, briefly landing on Brielle, then skipping past her as if she weren't there. With a practiced smile, she beelined straight to the white woman behind Brielle in line, her voice saccharine. "Welcome to the Astoria Grand. You must be one of our platinum-level guests." Brielle turned slightly, confusion tightening her brow. Had she missed something? She had reserved her suite weeks in advance, paid in full, upgraded twice, and was even listed as one of the featured speakers in the hotel's own event pamphlet. She stepped forward, boarding confirmation in hand, and greeted the concierge. "Hi there." Checking in, Brielle Morgan. The young man behind the counter smiled politely, typing away, then hesitated. "Ah, yes. Miss Morgan. Just a moment." He stood up and disappeared behind a partition. That's when Carolyn returned. "Excuse me," she said, her tone overly measured. "Can I help you with something?" Brielle blinked, puzzled. "Yes. I'm checking into the Skyline Suite. Reservation under Brielle Morgan." Carolyn's eyes did a quick, unmistakable scan, hair to heels, then back again. "And are you sure that's the correct name? We sometimes get people confused about our premium-level reservations." Brielle forced a smile. "I'm sure." Carolyn didn't return the smile. Instead, she leaned in ever so slightly, her voice lowering. "It's just, the Skyline Suite is reserved for VIP guests attending the conference. I'd like to confirm your credentials." Brielle's jaw tightened. "You'll find I'm one of the keynote speakers. Page 12 in the event guide." The awkward beat that followed was saved only by the concierge returning with a key card. "Everything's in order, Ms. Morgan." "Welcome." Carolyn's smile faltered. "Enjoy your stay," she said curtly before disappearing down the hall. Brielle told herself to let it go. She had dealt with subtle digs before, coded questions, condescending tones, and visible gatekeepers who couldn't see past her skin tone and youth. But this was a five-star hotel during a women's empowerment event. She expected better. After settling into her suite, floor-to-ceiling windows, curated artwork, imported linens, she spent the afternoon reviewing her speech. By early evening, she decided to visit the executive lounge for tea and quiet reflection. She changed into a cream blouse and slacks, swiped her keycard at the entrance, and stepped inside. The lounge was a world of calm. Jazz music flowed through invisible speakers. A few guests lounged with cocktails, others typed away on sleek laptops. She settled into a corner armchair by the window, sipped chamomile tea, and gazed out at Lake Michigan. It felt good to exhale. But peace doesn't always last. 15 minutes later, she saw Carolyn again. This time, the manager wasn't alone. She was with two hotel staff and wore a pinched expression that clashed with the posh surroundings. She scanned the lounge, spotted Brielle, and began walking over. Brielle straightened, heart sinking. Carolyn stopped in front of her, arms folded. "Good evening," she said flatly. "This area is reserved for our elite guests only." Brielle blinked. "Yes, I'm aware. That's why I'm here." Carolyn's lips twitched. "May I see your room key?" "Excuse me?" "Your keycard. I need to confirm your access. Lounge privileges are extended only to certain tiers." Guests nearby shifted uncomfortably. One man lowered his newspaper. Brielle, already embarrassed, reached into her bag and handed over the card. Carolyn barely glanced before handing it back. "There must be a mistake. This key isn't showing in our lounge registry." Brielle sat taller. "I was told at check-in that I had full access. I'm staying in the Skyline suite." Carolyn leaned down. "Then perhaps you should enjoy your suite instead. This lounge is for our VIP guests, clients with an elevated profile." And there it was. The unsaid said. Brielle felt the sting behind her eyes, but her voice stayed calm. "I am a keynote speaker at the conference your hotel is hosting. I've booked the most expensive suite in the building. I have every right to sit here." Carolyn's eyes flashed. "If you don't leave quietly, I will have you escorted out." For a moment, time froze. Brielle's teacup remained on the saucer. The jazz continued to play. But inside, something broke. Not just from the humiliation, but from the audacity. Slowly, she stood, gathering her bag. Her hands shook. "You've made a mistake," she said, her voice low but steady. "And you're going to regret it." "Is that a threat?" Carolyn snapped. "It's a promise." 10 minutes later, Brielle sat on a bench near the hotel's front garden. Her phone trembled in her hand as she dialed. 1 ring. 2. Then, "Brielle? You okay?" "Uncle Leo," her voice cracked. "They kicked me out of the lounge. The manager, she said I didn't belong. She called security." There was a pause on the line. Then Mayor Leonard Morgan's voice grew sharp. "Stay put. I'm on my way." Brielle hung up, stared at the entrance. The hotel's logo gleamed in gold above the doors. Minutes ago, she felt like she belonged here. Now, she felt small, invisible. But what she didn't know yet, what Carolyn Whitman would soon find out, was that the woman they tried to push out had just made a call that would turn the whole hotel upside down. The glass doors of the Astoria Grand swung open with quiet urgency as a line of suited men moved quickly into the lobby, their earpieces flashing under the high-gloss chandeliers. The energy in the room shifted, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Guests turned their heads. Staff stood straighter. And at the center of it all strode a tall man in a tailored charcoal coat, his salt and pepper beard immaculately groomed, and his stride filled with calm purpose. Mayor Leonard Morgan didn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone announced that something significant was about to unfold. Brielle spotted him instantly through the glass from where she sat near the fountain garden outside. She stood up, brushing the wrinkles from her blouse, her chest tightening with a strange blend of relief, pride, and residual humiliation. "Uncle Leo," she said under her breath, her voice barely audible over the gentle ripple of the fountain beside her. He turned toward her with laser focus, his stride unbroken as he closed the distance. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low but taut with restrained fury. Brielle nodded, but her eyes shimmered. She dragged me out like I was a trespasser, she said softly, in front of everyone. Leonard's eyes narrowed as he placed a hand on her shoulder. She picked the wrong niece today. Inside the lobby, Carolyn Whitman was speaking with the front desk agent, completely unaware that the storm she had summoned now stood 10 feet away. When she turned and saw Mayor Morgan standing in the center of the lobby with Brielle by his side, her breath caught in her throat. The color drained from her face like someone had flipped a switch. Mr. Morgan, she managed, straightening her blazer. I didn't expect to. Clearly, he interrupted, voice steady, not raised, but commanding. You didn't expect the young woman you just humiliated to have a voice. Or a name. Or family. But you're going to learn today just how wrong that assumption was. Guests had begun to gather along the periphery, drawn by the gravity of the moment. Staff peeked out from behind concierge stations. Phones hovered subtly, recording. You escorted her out, Leonard continued, without checking her ID, without checking her reservation, and without listening. You looked at her and decided she didn't belong. Carolyn stammered, her words collapsing over one another. It's protocol to protect guest spaces and maintain lounge standards, Leonard cut in again, that somehow apply only when it's a black woman sitting in a corner sipping tea. Carolyn's mouth opened, but nothing came out. At that moment, the elevator chimed, and a woman stepped out, a tall Korean American in a navy sheath dress and power heels that clicked with unmistakable authority. Madison Park, CEO of Astoria Grand Hotels, had been notified the moment the mayor's security team arrived. She wasted no time. Mayor Morgan, she said, offering a firm handshake, I apologize. I was just briefed. This is not how our hotel conducts business. Apparently, Leonard replied, it is exactly how your hotel conducts business. Madison's eyes turned to Brielle, and as she recognized her, her expression shifted. Ms. Morgan, I'm so sorry this happened. You are a featured guest at our summit. You should have been treated with honor. Carolyn shrank back slightly, her arms folded tightly. There was confusion. The only confusion here, Madison snapped, turning to her, is why you're still standing in this lobby after that display. Madison then turned to the security team. Escort Ms. Whitman off the premises. I'll handle the paperwork personally. There was a moment of silence as two hotel staff quietly stepped forward. Carolyn opened her mouth to protest but then stopped. Her gaze flicked toward the crowd, toward the phones, then back to Brielle. This isn't over, she muttered. You're right, Brielle said quietly, because this time, it won't get buried. The next morning, Brielle sat at the hotel's rooftop cafe, looking out over the Chicago skyline. She'd received dozens of texts, supportive messages from conference attendees, fellow founders, even influencers sharing clips of the previous day's confrontation. But one message stood out. Would love a call. Aiden Chen. We met briefly at the Seoul Tech Gala last year. She tapped to call. Ms. Morgan, Aiden's voice was smooth and warm. I saw what happened. I was there. I stayed quiet yesterday because I didn't want to make it worse in the moment, but you handled it with more grace than most CEOs I've ever met. Thank you, she replied, still unsure how to respond to public attention. That means a lot. I've been following your wellness tech, he continued. We're expanding into holistic AI integrations. I think there's synergy. Let's talk investment. Brielle blinked, caught off guard. You're serious? Dead serious, he said. I like investing in people who don't just build platforms, but who can stand in the fire and stay standing. Brielle smiled. Then let's talk. Later that afternoon, just as she was preparing to head back to her suite, she received an unexpected message. Carolyn Whitman had requested a private meeting. Against her better judgment, and driven more by curiosity than forgiveness, Brielle agreed. They met in a reserved boardroom. Carolyn looked different now, smaller, somehow, without her crisp posture or air of authority. I'm not here to excuse myself, she said, her voice thin. But I need to say this. Brielle crossed her arms, silent. I was raised by my great-aunt Eleanor, Carolyn began. She ran boarding houses in the 50s. Back then, there were rules. She used to tell me, some people just don't fit the image. I didn't understand what she meant at first. But over time, you grow up with it like wallpaper. Brielle said nothing. Carolyn continued. She mentored me when I entered hospitality. And those ideas, they stick. You don't even realize you've internalized them until, she swallowed hard. Until someone like you makes you see it in full color. Brielle's expression didn't change. And now that you've seen it? I'm trying, Carolyn said. I want to be better. Not because I got caught, but because I finally realize how much harm silence does. Brielle looked at her carefully. Trying is good, she said. But it's not my job to heal you. You don't get a clean slate because you confessed. You get a second chance only if you do the work. Carolyn nodded slowly. I understand. As Brielle left the room, her mind buzzed, not with anger anymore, but with clarity. Some stories aren't just about injustice. Some are about what comes after, when power shows up, when accountability is demanded, and when silence breaks. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this: she hadn't just spoken at the summit, she had lived its message. And now, the world was watching. The morning after Brielle's quiet but firm confrontation with Carolyn in the boardroom, she sat at her suite's desk overlooking the city skyline, watching the glass towers bathe in the amber light of dawn. Her mind was still swirling. She had spoken with power. She had held her ground. But something about Carolyn's sudden remorse, so convenient, so timed, lingered like an unsettled fog. And while the hotel had issued a bland apology and promised internal reviews, Brielle knew better than to trust polite statements. Real change didn't come from whispers behind closed doors. It came from light. And the truth, when exposed, had a way of burning everything that stood in its way. She was sipping her coffee when a new email arrived in her inbox, subject line, urgent, story lead, discreet inquiry. It was from Corey Hughes, a journalist she recognized from the Chicago Tribune. He had built his reputation on deep-dive exposés and wasn't known for chasing fluff. She clicked open the message. Ms. Morgan, I've been following the developments at the Astoria Grand. A source tipped me off last night about something buried, literally, in the hotel's archives. I believe there's more to what happened to you than a single act of prejudice. I think it's part of something far older and far uglier. I'm requesting a brief, confidential meeting. No quotes. No pressure. Just facts. Respectfully, Corey Hughes. Brielle stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. A part of her wanted to move on, celebrate the Aiden deal, focus on the summit, enjoy the applause. But another part, the one that had stood up in that lounge when it mattered most, refused to let the curtain fall on a half-written story. She agreed to meet. The following day, in a quiet corner booth of a local cafe far from the glimmering hotel facade, Brielle sat across from Corey. He was younger than she expected, early 30s, glasses, sleeves rolled, eyes sharp but not unkind. He had a small leather notebook and a recorder, which he didn't touch. I appreciate you taking this meeting, he said. What I'm about to tell you, well, let's just say I wouldn't bring it to you if I didn't have reason to believe it matters. Go ahead, Brielle said, her voice calm but steeled. Corey leaned forward slightly. I started digging through public records and city archives, trying to understand the roots of how a place like the Astoria Grand could still harbor someone like Carolyn Whitman in a leadership role, even after years of diversity initiatives and public-facing reforms. I filed a request for access to their historical permits and operating documents. What I found led me into the hotel's off-site archive basement, an old storage room beneath their maintenance wing, hidden under decades of dust and silence. And what I discovered down there might explain exactly why this happened to you. He slid a photograph across the table. It was a yellowed ledger dated 1964. Handwritten across the top were the words "Preferred Client List, Internal Use Only." Below were rows of names, all with annotations, some marked green tier, others red flag. Next to each name was a short description: executive, welcomed, donor, priority, and then, chillingly, colored, denied, troublemaker, watch, unfit for lobby access. Brielle felt her stomach tighten. She flipped the page. There were more. Corey's voice remained steady. The hotel was founded by Eleanor Whitman, Carolyn's aunt. She hosted private events during the civil rights era, segregationist meetings under the guise of industry summits. She wasn't just a bigot in private, she institutionalized it into the way the hotel operated. And Carolyn didn't just inherit the job. She was mentored directly under Eleanor. She learned this system from the inside. And from what the records suggest, she preserved it. He paused. Even the staff onboarding handbook from the 1980s included coded language, guidelines for handling non-standard clientele, which we both know is just dressed-up discrimination. Brielle leaned back, absorbing it all. Her voice, when it returned, was low but resolute. I need copies of everything. Corey nodded. Already digitized. I can transfer them securely. She nodded again. And I want you to be the one to break this story. All of it. Not just what happened to me, but what's been happening in this hotel for decades, behind smiles and polished floors. That afternoon, Brielle sat with Mayor Leonard Morgan in his office. The walls were lined with books, awards, and framed photos of protests, courtroom victories, and family gatherings. She showed him the documents. She showed him the photos. And when she was done, he sat in silence for a full minute before saying, "We're not just dealing with a rogue manager. We're staring down a legacy built on exclusion. And now it's our turn to write the next chapter." The city press conference was scheduled for the following day. Word had spread that something big was coming, and by the time the cameras were rolling, the room was standing room only. Brielle stood at the podium, the hotel's logo flickering on the screens behind her, a large projection showing the ledger image that started it all. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice unwavering. "My name is Brielle Morgan. I am a keynote speaker at the Women in Leadership Summit. I am also a founder, an innovator, and a proud Chicagoan. But today, I'm speaking not about my work, but about the truth." She paused. "A week ago, I was forcibly removed from a hotel lounge despite having full privileges. I was told I didn't belong. But what we now know is that this moment, this humiliation, wasn't random. It was the product of a system built decades ago to decide who belongs and who doesn't. A system built by Eleanor Whitman, who once ran pro-segregation events from the same building. A system preserved, quietly, insidiously, by her niece, Carolyn, who carried that legacy into our present." The room was silent, breathless. But no more. Not here. Not now. Today, we expose that legacy. And starting today, we dismantle it. Mayor Morgan stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder before taking the mic. Effective immediately, Carolyn Whitman is removed from all leadership roles within the Astoria Grand Hotel chain. Her actions violated not only ethical standards but civil rights protocols. This administration is launching an audit of historical practices across the city's luxury hospitality sector. And we're not stopping until transparency becomes policy. Madison Park, the CEO of the hotel chain, stepped forward next. "We have failed," she said plainly. "And we own that failure. But we will also lead the change. We are appointing a new interim director of diversity, equity, and guest accountability, someone who understands the weight of this story and the work that lies ahead. That person is Corey Hughes." Gasps rose in the room. Corey stepped forward, stunned but composed. "We don't erase the past by pretending it didn't happen," he said. "We confront it. We document it. And then we build something better." The story went viral. Not just in Chicago, but across the country. News outlets praised Brielle's grace and bravery. Social media lit up with support, with hashtags like #WeBelong and #HospitalityForAll trending for days. And Brielle, once just a guest they tried to push out, was now a national figure, not because of the injustice done to her, but because of how she answered it. A week later, she launched a new initiative, the Belonging Standard, a nonprofit dedicated to certifying inclusive practices in travel, hotels, and guest services nationwide. The first hotel to receive its certification? A newly restructured, retrained Astoria Grand. Sometimes justice takes decades. Sometimes it walks through the front doors of a hotel and refuses to leave quietly. And sometimes, the voice they tried to silence becomes the one that changes everything. As the author of the guest they tried to push out, I want to take a moment to step back from the events of the story and reflect on what it truly represents, not just for Brielle Morgan, but for anyone who's ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. This story isn't just about a hotel, a lounge, or a rude manager. It's about legacy. It's about systems and silent rules that get passed down, not always through words, but through actions, expectations, and exclusions. Carolyn Whitman wasn't just one person acting poorly. She was the product of a system that for decades whispered, only certain people are welcome here. Brielle's strength came not from shouting back, but from standing tall, from knowing who she was and refusing to shrink. And that's the lesson I hope resonates most. There will be times when you're underestimated. There will be rooms where your presence alone challenges someone's worldview. But dignity isn't defined by how others see you, it's defined by how you carry yourself, especially when no one is clapping for you. To the young women watching this, especially those who've walked into spaces and felt the invisible wall of doubt rise around them, you are not alone. Your worth doesn't shrink in uncomfortable silence. Your dreams don't diminish just because someone can't see them. And to those in positions of influence, leaders, employers, hosts, this is a call to audit more than your policies. Audit your culture. Audit your instinctive reactions. Who do you assume belongs? Who do you serve with warmth and who with scrutiny? Change doesn't always come from outrage. Sometimes it comes from accountability. From truth-tellers. From whistleblowers. From guests who won't stay silent. As the voice behind us, Justice Stories, I want to thank every one of you who took the time to listen, to feel, and to reflect. This channel isn't just about storytelling, it's about building empathy, one real moment at a time. If Brielle's story moved you, I ask you to share it. Talk about it. Use it as a conversation starter in your communities, your schools, your workplaces. And most of all, thank you for being part of a growing movement that believes justice isn't a moment. It's a commitment. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, stand tall. Speak up. And remember, you belong.